Welcome to episode 3 of the Bithell Games Podcast. I'm Alexander Slawinski.
I'm Mike Bithell.
Each week, we'll talk games, what it's like to make games, and the random stuff we don't generally find time to talk about because we are playing and or making games. We also try to have guests regularly on the show who can give us an inside look at a particular aspect of the video game industry. Today, I am happy I'm proud of
to
this
happily
one.
introduce.
Wow.
I am proud to happily introduce Mike Rose of TinyBuild.
Hello.
Hello.
Another British person, that's good.
It's good. It's good to get the balance back. It's good.
Yeah,
It feels comfortable. We've done a few things now with American guests, and it just I feel all over.
Americans are the worst, aren't they?
Americans
So
are all terrible. Yes, that's the statement. That's the big. Well, speaking of people who are terrible, you hate games journalists, Mike. Talk about
Okay, we're going to get into that in a second. Hold on. Hold on to that. Hold on to that thought. I first would like to point out that Mike Rose of TinyBuild. TinyBuild has had a very, very good couple of weeks. And you've released Punch Club, or when did you release Punch Club? When did that actually happen?
So let me look at my little calendar thing. So Punch Club released on the 8th of January.
Okay.
That was on Steam, and then it released 6 days later on iOS.
So it has sold over 100,000 units with revenues exceeding $1 million between iOS and Steam. So congratulations on that one. You also announced 4 other games.
Yes.
I remember Final Station because that looks hot. Mm-hmm. But what are the others?
Right. So yeah, Final Station was the one that we announced on the Tuesday. So we announced 4 games all in the same week because we're crazy. I don't know. So yeah, it was. Let me see. What was it? It was Final Station was on the Tuesday. Then it was Road to Valhalla on the Wednesday, which is kind of like a Marble Madness style game. Then on the Thursday was Lovely Planet Arcade, which is a first-person gun ballet, which is a sequel to Lovely Planet. And then Friday was Diaries of a Spaceport Janitor, which I'm particularly excited about because I'm the producer on that one. So I'm all like, that'll be nice. But yeah, that was the 4 games, and strangely enough, it's not all signed and dotted yet. But we might actually have another one very soon as well. So awesome. Yeah.
So what do you do? What is your when you originally went to TinyBuild, it was very much in a marketing role. So now, from what you've just explained, you are now in a marketing producer. Like, what is your job at this point at TinyBuild?
I was hired to just shout a lot, basically. I do a little bit of everything. So I do all the marketing stuff because I wrote about video games for 10 years, so I kind of know how that works. And then I also look for games, so I trawl all of the places where I am good at finding games on the internet and try to find ones that kind of fit us.
Now, you just said trawl, right? Not troll?
Yeah, troll, yeah.
Okay.
I use the word troll from my video game writing days, because that's what we used to call it, just like sticking up, what was it called? Google Reader. Just sticking up a G-Reader and trawling through that every single morning when I woke up. So that word's kind of stuck with me. But yeah, I do a bit of that. I do writing on the games. So I was like the lead writer on Party Hard. I did a bunch of the like kind of helping with the translations on Punch Club and with Dungeon Art, etc. Because a lot of our developers are kind of Russian and Ukrainian, so
and we will get to that too.
Yeah, they like having a British speaking person kind of rewriting things for them in British, and then somebody else then goes and takes all the Britishisms out of them. What else do I kind of help on the producing side as well. So Dungeon Art, which just came out today, I'm the producer on. And then I work with Twitch streamers, I work with YouTubers, and when we go to shows, I stand around and wave my arms in the air and shout at people. Just kind of anything they ask me to do, I have a crack at.
Fair play, man.
Yeah. So now here's what I love about you.
Okay.
You will get into a Twitter fight.
Oh, yeah.
Now, I tried to keep Mike very much out of those. But here's the beauty.
Hold me back, Alexander. Yeah.
Here's the beauty: is I know that you're trained. So every time you get into one of these fights, I know you know better, but you're using it to its full marketing advantage, its full yelling advantage. And I
wouldn't do that.
No.
This doesn't sound like me.
But I want to take you back right now to January 15th.
Okay.
I'll take you back to January 15th.
This is turning into a court case. This is good. This is a court case. It's like watching Making a Murderer.
When you wrote, and I'm just going to read the string of tweets here. Look, to give you an idea of what it means to the majority of the games press right now to cover an indie game. Someone told me today they cover indie stuff all the time. I went on their site and it was a AAA all the way down. Zero indie stuff there. When I asked for a specific example, they linked me to the top 10 list that had one indie title on it and told me that they have to slip indies in. If your idea of covering smaller games is, quote, let's slip one in between 20 posts about AAA games so our audience doesn't cry, end quote, then hey, cool. I get it. Indie games don't bring traffic. AAA expletive does. But I also know you sit there for an hour a day looking for stuff to cover. Or trawl, as the word we learned here is. So while you're at looking for stuff to cover and finding nothing, why not go to TigSource forums and pick something cool there? And then you have a gif of a Power Ranger walking slowly away from it exploding.
Yeah, I was because Mike had already fired a gif at me.
I had.
So that inspired me.
So there was some back and forth there, but I would genuinely like to hear, because I certainly receive the emails that you do send to press, because I'm still on every press list.
Oh yeah, me too.
But so I see the emails that you send out, but I do understand what you're talking about and how things sort of came out, got taken out of context. So now that you have more than 140 characters, why don't you sort of explain where your head was at with those tweets?
I mean, it's pretty self-explanatory, but even when I was writing about games, I was incredibly frustrated over and over again, and I had plenty of private conversations with people, at a lot of the big sites where they would just straight up say to me, look, we're not going to cover all of these smaller games because we need to pay people to write, and if we cover these smaller games which don't bring any traffic, then we don't make enough.
And they don't, and we know this,
and that's fine, right?
Right.
But here's the big secret, and I'm sure you can back me up on this. There are 100% times for every single person writing about games where they either run out of stuff to write about that day, or you find yourself just looking over and over the same list, refreshing back when we had Google Reader, refreshing that a couple of times, and generally, you have space. It's not like you've got back-to-back news articles to write all day, right? That just doesn't happen. It does happen some days. Most days it doesn't. And so when, for example, I was at Garma, I wrote about the AAA stuff, and I wrote about the indie stuff, and somehow I managed to write about all of it. I know it's crazy. I must be some kind of genius. But somehow I managed to do all of it, and I managed to do interviews with AAA people at Ubisoft and wherever. And then I was also writing indie stuff, and I was seeing really cool things that were... Maybe they'd becoming a little popular on Steam. Maybe they weren't even released. Then they were just a demo on TigSource. And somehow I was managing to write about these things as well.
I think that's the aspect that stood out to me is the seeking out stories. Is something that you were talking about. This idea of going to these sites, of trying to find kind of undiscovered gems, right?
Yeah, and it's not hard. It's really not hard. It used to be easier. I won't deny that. It used to be a lot easier to find. You'd literally go on indiegames.com, and indiegames.com will have probably covered every single actually decent game worth talking about that week. Now is a lot more difficult, but it doesn't mean this article's only going to get 500 hits. And when we write about AAA, it gets 5,000 hits. So therefore, there's no point in doing it. And the argument then, oh, it's wasting time when we could be writing something that will get loads of traffic. It's a terrible argument because I've sat with people, like, I've sat in press rooms.
Hold on, isn't that the proper argument? Isn't the proper argument that if we cover this totally random element of Destiny,
yes,
we're going to get 10,000 hits. But if we cover this indie game, we're going to get 1,000 hits. So the economics of that...
You can do both, though, right? Like, there's no reason you can't do both. It's not when you write about the AAA thing, you don't have time to write about the indie thing anymore. That's absolutely not true whatsoever. And I would never take an argument that it is, you know? Like, I think it's a weak argument that people make. Like, I managed to fill my days doing both. And so when people, I've sat, I was going to say, like, when I've sat at, like, I'm at conferences, like I'm at GDC, for example, and I'm in the press room or whatever, I'm talking to someone, and they're like, oh, yeah, just, like, did this interview with big AAA publisher. Yeah, I might just write that up a little bit and just relax now. I've kind of got that for the day. And I'm like, you're surrounded by really cool people who have really cool things to talk about. If you just go to the indie track, there's loads of people you could be interviewing there. And sure, it's going to get a fifth of the traffic that your big AAA thing is getting, but you're not doing anything now.
So what you're saying is that major sites should remove full-time employment and move back to a model where you get paid per article, so then everyone would be getting multiple stories.
I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying the opposite. I'm saying that so people sit, and I know it's for a fact that people do this. They sit and you'll write out an article and you'll kind of you'll chill a little bit and you'll drift a little bit. Everybody does it in their jobs, but in that time, I'm arguing that you could be covering something else smaller. I mean, how long does it take to just cover a small game? Just write a little news article about it. What, like
25 minutes?
Less than that. Let's be honest.
No. Between writing it. No, I got this down to a science. Trust me.
Okay.
Between writing it and then having a colleague do a quick copy check on you.
Yeah.
Like 25 to 30 minutes is probably the slowest to get an article that's maybe 3 paragraphs with a picture long.
Okay. All right. So let's say it's 25 minutes. Is there never any point during someone's day at one of these big sites that they don't just have 25 minutes spare? Does that never happen?
So
that's what my argument is, basically.
Well, where I find it interesting, and I kind of find myself, I get what you're saying, but I also I also think about those kind of GDC situations. I'm like, that person's probably like knackered, right? Like it's a very specialized kind of specific situation. But the thing that really interests me that I've started hearing from other devs is that we're actually starting to get this kind of hierarchy of indies that,
absolutely.
There are big websites that will review a game from an established or known indie, but have a blanket policy for everyone else saying, no, we don't do reviews, we don't do coverage of indie games unless, you're someone in the class of 2012, 2013, one of us that kind of had a game that did all right during that period. And I know lots of people who can't get any coverage because of, and that's not a game.
But that's back to a traffic question. But that's back to the traffic. If you do an interview and it gets traffic, and someone else who is of the same group does an interview and doesn't get traffic, like it's not traffic. I would say it's response, right? It's because most reporters do not follow the ups and downs of each article's traffic, but you do see the response, you do see the comments.
But I think then this leads to a bit. So right. Let's say, for the sake of argument, you're correct, right? And that it makes no sense for sites to write about smaller games, right? Because they're not getting the traffic, and so then some people start to wonder why, like, these bigger YouTubers are becoming more and more prominent. These bigger YouTubers who it doesn't really matter what they cover because people aren't there for the games, people are there for the personality. So when someone, you pick a person at random, like Northern Lion or someone like that, he will cover anything he wants to Because, and I'm sure he's got deals, etc., behind the scenes that, people don't have. I'm sure most big YouTubers have. But he can literally just go on Steam and he can go, oh, that game looks cool. And he can just grab it and then record a video of it. And it will still get enough traffic on his video that he can do that. And he's safe to do that.
So that's really interesting. So that's not philanthropy. Like, I know Ryan, so I feel quite reasonably comfortable, being a bit like this. But that's not him being a heroic savior of the indies.
Oh no, of course, no. I'm not saying it is.
But that's interesting, right? Because we are asking. So with if we agree on the idea that games website, Destiny gets thousands,
sure.
Indie game gets hundreds of views. Then they are incentivized by finances, by every metric, basically, to cover the big stuff. Whereas if a YouTuber, that incentive isn't there, that's interesting. That's interesting that it doesn't really matter. And that's why possibly, people are turning to those guys for new stuff. My other problem with all of this is that everyone starts somewhere, and increasingly, you're seeing the names of the big famous indies of 2-3 years from now are right now the ones trying to get that first bit of coverage for their little first game, and it's kind of, I worry that by slamming the door shut, in traditional press, that's a problem. I mean, increasingly, arguably, that doesn't necessarily lead to sales in quite the same direct way that YouTubers do, but it's still, it's still important. It's still something that sets the tone for what games are out this week,
So moving away from media analysis, which I think we'll bring Mike back at a future date we'll just have we'll have a media analysis roundtable, because there is a ton to discuss here. But one of the things that I would like to transition to, now that we've talked about YouTubers, is one of the main. Actually, I shouldn't even qualify this. Mike, talk to me about Punch Club and Twitch and what you did there.
So in simple terms, we sort of early December were thinking about, we knew the launch was going to be January, and we were thinking what cool things we could do. We had a bunch of different ideas, but obviously we wanted to come up with the idea. And we came up with this Twitch Plays idea, where we essentially took the idea of Twitch Plays Pokemon, we injected it into Punch Club. It became very obvious to us quite quickly, that it worked with Punch Club, with the voting system we had in place. So the Twitch chat could type in hashtags and influence what happened in this game. And we decided we'd take that idea and make it such that the game didn't launch until Twitch beat it. And the reason it worked, other than it being sort of a spectacle, was that Twitch was super on board with it. Twitch are kind of quite great to us as a company. They have been for a while. So when we approached them with the idea, it just so happened that they were about to launch a Twitch Plays category in January, so that kind of lined up pretty well for us. And they said, yeah, if you guys do that, that would be amazing, and we will give you sort of front page of this stream for at least the first 24 hours of it, so you can build up some numbers. We said, that's great. We went to Steam, we went to Valve, and we said, hey, this is a thing we're doing. And Valve said, that sounds crazy. Yeah, let's, how can we help you with that? And they allowed us to open pre-orders on the game at the moment that the stream went live.
Clever.
And then it all went incredibly swimmingly somehow. I mean, I was scared, I'll be honest. You imagine all the things that can go wrong. Mm-hmm. I was bricking it. What if the game just broke? The setup we had was kind of crazy. It was running on Luke Burtis' computer in Seattle, and he set it running, and then a couple of hours later went to sleep when I woke up, and I had access to his computer from my computer, so I could alter things. And if something went wrong with the game, restart the game and all this kind of stuff.
Sure.
But it was an incredibly intense 2 days. I was there for 30 of the 36 hours that it was running, and I was in the chat. And every time something went minorly wrong, and we had to just restart the game, or we had to just have a break, I'd be there throwing keys for the game into the chat to keep people there, and that worked really well. they finished the game an hour before Steam closed up for the weekend. So we managed to slip in through the door just before it happened, and because of that, the game was featured in 4 different places on the front page of Steam for the entire weekend, which was not terrible. And then that has continued now for the last 2 weeks. It kind of, obviously it's slightly slowed down now compared to at the launch, but now I think we've just passed 150,000 copies sold in the last 24 hours.
Congratulations.
Really cool.
So I'd be lying if I didn't say it surprised us at how big it's been. I mean, obviously it was our plan, but we didn't know our plan would go so well. And it's rolled quite well for us as well, because then we launched the iPhone version last week, and Apple were all over that because the buzz was still happening online, so they were happy to give that a big feature. And then Apple have essentially said to us, hey, it would be a really good idea if you launched Dungelot this, next Thursday as well. And we said, okay. So Dungelot launched today, and they're giving that a big feature as well. Partially because it's a great game, but off the back of the stuff with Punch Club as well. So all in all, it worked quite well for us, yeah.
Superb.
So the amazing thing about this is TinyBuild's sort of business strategy is being a publisher. And of the 17 games you've published, 2 have been from US studios, but the majority are from Russian and Ukrainian devs.
Yes.
And we've sort of discussed this on the show previously. I'm a massive supporter of Eastern European development, not only in terms of costs, but also in terms of technical talent. There's an amazing amount of technical talent coming out of Eastern Europe. So as sort of the British dude at a company that is more Eastern European based and focused, what do you bring to the table? What is it that you do that helps these games transition easier to a wider market for the Americas? And yes, that.
Well, I think one of the big problems, right, with the kind of Eastern European game scene is that so many of the developers over there do not realize that anybody outside of Eastern Europe gives a shit about their games.
I want to talk about that because that's one that blows my mind. So I have had these conversations over time where they do not get that they are playing on a global marketplace just like everyone else.
Exactly. And it blows my mind. I remember, so I am a ginormous fan of the DevGam conference, which is in various places, but they have one in Moscow, they have one in Kiev, they have one in Belarus, and when I go to these conferences, and they run this thing which is a little bit like the IGF, right? But for Eastern European devs, and they get hundreds and hundreds of entries. It's basically as big as the IGF was sort of 5 years ago, which was already pretty big then. And there's all these developers who I've never heard of before. And when I try to work out why I've never heard of them before, it's because they just don't talk about their games at all. And they, whenever you find a Russian developer who's done really well, it seems quite by accident that they've done really well. Like the Dungelot guy, when he brought Dungelot out on iPhone, I think it was 2011, something like that. It became quite a niche hit. And when I ask him so what kind of what kind of marketing stuff did you do for that? He's just none. I don't know. I just put the game out and people started playing it. And so whenever I go to DevGam, I literally spend 2 days just telling people, please talk about this. There's games where, and the thing is, it actually doesn't take that much of a nudge to make them realize this. There was a game called Basement, which came out last year on Steam Early Access. And I met them at DevGam, and they were showing it there, and it was kind of amazing. It was sort of like a underground drug lord management simulator thing. And I had a conversation with them where I was literally like, hey, if you email this to people like Kotaku and people like that, they will care, you know? And then, lo and behold, like a couple of weeks later, he's getting some press places because he decided to email people. But a lot of developers over there just don't realize that anybody cares. And I don't know, I think it's a culture thing as well, right? I think that there's this feeling of being rejected and of failure. Like if they email people and no one gets back to them, then that will be the end of it all. That's absolutely terrible to them. Whereas obviously over here, to a lot of us, we're kind of used to that, kind of used to being walled over and over again, and having to break through that. So yeah, part of what I do, to go back to your original question, which happened about 10 minutes ago, is that I essentially try to show some of these developers, like, holy crap, like you need to be talking about this. When we find games like The Final Station, and we talk to them, their minds are blown that we're even talking to them. Like they don't understand why we're coming to them and saying, hey, your game is freaking cool. And
it's crazy because you see something like The Final Station, and Mike immediately retweeted it. Like he sends me a link and shows it to me, and I'm like, yep, yeah, this is like you there are games that you see, and it's congratulations on finding them.
but like it doesn't even matter where it was from, right?
Right.
Like, no. Absolutely does not matter. That game could be from anywhere in the world.
Yeah, as long as it's properly localized, and there's there's enough polish on it that it doesn't immediately turn folks off. Yeah. It doesn't matter where it's from.
Yeah. So obviously the advantage that we have is that we have Russian and Ukrainian people on our team, right? So the language barrier is not an issue. So we're able to rock up to something like DevGam, and most people there actually talk pretty decent English, right? So I get by perfectly fine at these conferences. But some people don't, or they feel embarrassed to try and talk English or whatever, just like I would feel embarrassed to try and talk any other language. So I would imagine that it's not as simple as me just saying to other publishers, hey, do you think maybe you should be looking at Eastern Europe? Because they might actually need to hire someone who knows that. Can actually start a dialogue, but
why would you even do that at this point when TinyBuild is? I mean, you're on a path now. Like the thing that you were talking about before, about 2 to 3 years from now, like between Punch Club and some of the other stuff that I'm seeing in your portfolio, like you're on a path. Like why would you give that to anyone?
Well, when I joined the company a year ago, The thing is, if you know what I've been doing for the last decade, I have to have like these goals, right? And I have to make a difference, because if I don't, then what's the point in me being there? And I have to make an obvious difference as well, where people can go, hey, he made that difference. That might be an incredibly egotistical thing, but it's just what I have to do. And so when I joined this company, for me, it was, okay, I'm going to learn the ropes really, really quickly. I'm going to get all this down. And then we're just going to basically go off, and that is what I've been doing. And people have been saying to me, like especially in the last like 6 months, when I'm at shows and things, I always get like people saying the line like, "Oh man, TinyBuild came out of nowhere, didn't they?" And I like hearing that, because I know that I was at least a big reason for that happening. And, again, like as egotistical as it sounds, I like that I can make that difference. And yeah, this year is now the year I am down with this stuff now, I have proven to myself that I can do this. So now this year, just kind of like you've seen the last few weeks,
you've shaken off the imposter syndrome.
Yeah, exactly. And now I'm no longer just the dude who used to write about games and is now trying to have a crack at this. I now know I can do this. I now know when I go to PAX next week, I know everything I need to do there. I know the people I need to talk to. I know the events I need to go to. And yeah, we're going to attempt to be a big thing this year, basically. So yeah.
Mike, do you have a final question for Mike?
I'll do the textbook indie dev. We have a lot of people, indie devs, listening to this show. What is it that you're looking for when you're looking over these games on all these various places on the internet? What are the things that attract your attention? What's the really obvious mistake that people still shouldn't be making?
Oh man, okay. So I think it's part of it is difficult to explain. Part of it is just that it catches my eye, right? And it's not easy to explain that one. I can't go, to catch my eye, here is what you need to do. Like, it's just a thing.
Trains.
Yeah, well, exactly. Like, but like you see the trailer for Final Station, right? And you immediately go, holy crap, like that, right? And that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for a holy crap moment, and it needs to be just thrust upon me, basically. Like, I need to someone sends me an email, or they send me a trailer, or they see me at a conference. I saw a game, actually. I was at the Pocket Gamer Connects on Tuesday, and I was actually just about to leave, and a guy from Lithuania came up to me and said, hey, is it alright if I just show you something? And showed me a trailer for a game he's working on. And it was immediately, he'd put this trailer together really well. It was a short, just like minute-long trailer. He'd even like paid someone to do some voiceover, so it felt really polished. And it looked like one of our games. That's the bit I can't really explain. It just looked like a TinyBuild game, right?
So you're curating. You're actively looking for a specific kind of tone that suits you guys.
There's certain games that clearly don't match us, right? Like, so for example, I can't imagine we would ever sign like an Endless Runner, for example, like, because I don't think, and maybe we will. Maybe there'll be an Endless Runner that comes along and we go, holy crap, look at that. But right now, and I make that example because that's the majority of games that we receive in our inbox, like every single day, free-to-play Endless Runners. Sure. So yeah, and the other big thing for us is that it needs to be a multi-platform game. So if people are bringing just mobile games to us where they wouldn't work on PC or console, we're obviously, as you've kind of seen, we're expanding, and we need multi-platform games now. So we need games where we can envision it working on PC, at least PC really, and then at least one of either mobile or console. Because obviously, as you'd expect, like Xbox and PlayStation are trying to hit us up for games at the moment, and we've actually hired a bunch of people. We've got like, I think it's like 3 people who are like our team for bringing stuff to console now. So we're making that happen pretty quickly. We've got like 3 different games on the go for console right now.
Nice.
So yeah, that's as horribly vague as that is. It's games that are going to catch my eye. That are multi-platform. That sounds terrible, doesn't it? but yeah, if you want a real answer, that's the real answer. So.
Well, thank you, Mike Rose, for joining us. Former newsman of Gamasutra, current everything under the sun at TinyBuild, and we will. Can we get you back at some point if we decide to go down the media indie road?
I don't see why not. Why not?
Cool. Where can people send you their stuff, Mike?
Mike at tinybuild.com. Is the old email. Yeah.
Thanks for joining us.
No worries, thanks.
So, what's going on at the studio? This week we've been putting together a piece of box art for Volume Kodo. What you missed there is that there were these air quotes over the term box art.
I was going to jump in there. I don't, unless there's been some development that I'm not aware of. That's,
Yeah, since there isn't a box, but we're taking some extra time and money and making a piece of art that'll look good if we give it to magazines and websites and whatever a cross-media bar looks like on PlayStation VR. We have no idea, so we'll
indeed if there even is a cross-media bar.
Yeah, we have
are in very grey areas.
Yeah, like we have no idea. So we would like to use this art as a sort of presentation piece. Now, the thing about this piece of art is that Mike lovingly keeps referring to it as vanity art, and I get very upset by this term because
you don't like that, do you?
I don't, because it's not.
Because you don't like the idea that vanity kind of diminishes value. Is that what it is? It sounds like we don't need it.
It sounds like we don't need it.
Yeah,
like that. Oh, you made some box art. You got yourself a Maserati. It's like no, it's.
It
still has its like Toyota Corolla value, like, and I drive a Toyota Corolla, so there we go. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because we've gone through this process along with other work that we've done, and we've had conversations about vanity art versus concept art versus production art. And you had mentioned in other projects that we're sort of pitching right now, like that the arm on something is specific, like that's specifically vanity art because no 3D modeler can look at that and know how this thing works. So let's go through this, because I don't like the term vanity, but let's get the basics covered of what are the various versions of art.
So yeah, I mean, so vanity art, I'm not sure if where I picked up vanity art as a phrase. I don't know. I must have heard that at some point. But basically, yeah, you have, I think concept art is a term that's generally used now for any image that has been painted or drawn that has to do with a video game, right? Like in terms of, I think, the kind of the public consciousness, it's kind of a catch-all term for all of that work. But the key thing is, concept art, production art, and vanity art, I'm going to stick to that term, all have different purposes, and they're all done for different reasons, and therefore you do them differently. So to the very high level kind of description I would use, and again, like, I don't think these are industry standard necessarily, this is just how we talk internally. Concept art is a piece of artwork where you're playing with an idea, you're trying to work out the solution to a problem, so you don't know what a character should look like, or you're not sure what the lighting in this environment should be like, or you're not sure what a weapon should look like, and all these kind of questions of like, what is this? You then have the kind of a production concept art, or production art, where you're basically locking in specifics. So you're saying, right, the gun looks like this. We're all going to agree on it. And then you make orthographic projections, which is where you draw the object from all the different angles and kind of show what it looks like as a fully formed idea.
Now, when you're talking about orthographic projections, is that making a 3D model, or is that a 2D artist?
No, this is this is a 2D. So this is a lot of people have done this in school, where you have to draw your house from the front and the side and the top and the bottom, and all these kind of different angles. That's called an orthographic projection. And it's used, basically, it's just you're defining exactly what that object is, or that character, or that environment, so that then a 3D artist can go away and build that. And
so if you go to like Zappos and you look at the shoe, and the shoe's like photographed from a bunch of different angles, that's what you're talking about.
Yeah, that's what that would, whether they would still call it an orthographic projection, if it's a photo. Orthographic projection it's a very old draftsman's term that instantly ages me and talks about how long I've been in the industry for. Because you have an isometric projection, which a lot of gamers will know what an isometric view is from games, but isometric view would be kind of this 30-degree angles on objects, and you draw from that angle. It's about defining specificity. I always use it. It's if you're using a ruler, if you're actually thinking things through, you're in that kind of production phase, because at that point you're defining stuff. You're not asking what should this character looks like. You're saying this character looks like this. And then the kind of the third kind of art, which is the stuff that I think gamers generally will see the most of, is vanity art. And vanity art is interesting because the other kinds of concept art we've talked about are a step in a process, and ultimately the process is to make a video game. Vanity art is artwork which stands aside from that and is the end product. you don't paint those pictures because it'll help you make the game. You paint those pictures because you need a beautiful piece of artwork that can be used in marketing, sometimes in box art, sometimes on websites, whatever. It is the end product. It's the end product, and I think that's a useful distinction to have, because the goals are different. Because that is being designed to be a cool piece of artwork. You can paint things in kind of vague ways. Sometimes you can kind of avoid details that might be difficult to model, or you specifically put lots of effort into things that don't really matter from concept art. So for example, it's not very important in concept art necessarily to do absolute brilliant precise detail, because absolute precise detail, like the texture of a piece of fabric, that's useful at the production art phase, but when you're working out kind of what a costume should look like, you don't necessarily need to waste the time of the artist doing that kind of very specific detail work. Whereas with vanity art, you want a piece of artwork that's really cool and well realized and has all those objectives, so that stuff can come in. So it really is always, and this is true of every area of game development, it's what are you trying to achieve, and is this helping? So yes, vanity art is what we're producing at the moment for Coda, which is artwork that is not going to inform anything to do with the production of the game. The game is being produced without it. This is artwork that is just cool artwork. I don't think that diminishes. I think it's okay, because it has those objectives from a marketing and kind of a branding kind of perspective that totally justify it. It's not being done without purpose. It's just being done with purpose, which is not video game production.
One of the hiccups that we ran into is that the characters that we're using for this box art do not have renders essentially inside the game, so we cannot pose them or do anything along those lines. So we've been using paint to get these characters ready for this box art. Now, one of the interesting things that you and I discussed is when we started looking at various box arts across the industry, that you started pointing out to me that several of these characters aren't painted. They're not drawn. They are the high quality 3D models that are used in the game and then posed, and then a bunch of photographic trickery is used on them to make this incredibly beautiful art. Can you just walk through that process a little bit?
Sure. So when you're making video game characters for kind of modern video games, you model them at an incredibly high resolution. People will have seen images of like ZBrush or stuff like that, where people are literally drawing the pimples in the skin and the kind of the super detail high res stuff. And of course, when you're playing the game, that mesh isn't in the game because your console would set light. You have to put it out. What they do is, though, that is then very cleverly processed into normal maps and textures, and kind of we create the illusion of that detail without actually including all of the data of those polygons. However, you still have that super high resolution mesh, so that's often the thing that's used for your pre-rendered trailer or your box art, and sometimes even, in fact, completely new meshes are made. Often, actually, these new meshes are made simply for your pre-rendered trailers and cutscenes and your box art. So they're 3D meshes, and then what you do is you pose them in the cool style, and then effectively the process is similar to how a movie poster's done. If you've seen a movie poster with more than one character on it, chances are, if that movie's from the last 10 years or so, those two actors showed up to the studio to have their photo taken on different days. This is a brilliant craft. When it's done well, it's seamless. When it's done badly, you notice it. But these kind of photo composites, they're often referred to as photocomps in terms of how they're produced. It's not that people literally sit there and painstakingly paint this character. It's that they use Photoshop and tools like it very, very expertly to kind of combine and create these kind of composite images. So it's a different set of skills, and it's what's interesting, as you say, in this case, is because we don't have 3D meshes of the characters we're using in this imagery, we had to kind of paint instead. I guess other options would have been to hire models, literally just go out and find people who look like the characters and photograph them and then work from there. But we've gone for, I think it's looking really cool, actually. We're working with a concept artist to get kind of these really nice paintings.
But it's a very methodical process. Like it really is taking more time than I think any. I mean, it's certainly taking more time than I thought it would, and generally that I think anyone in the audience would, because we are creating, because we don't have a model, right? Like we don't have a starting point. We're having discussions about the person's face because they're not a real person. Like,
well, what we're really doing is to continue what I described earlier, is effectively we're doing a concept art phase and a vanity art phase, because these characters, while we do have some kind of concept art of these characters and some definition of what they look like, we've not worked it up to the level of detail you normally would. Obviously, we would have done more concept art if we were modeling them. So we're kind of skipping / combining a step there, which I think is slowing it down. So an example of that would be, if we say we're doing vanity artwork for an existing game, or even a game where there's already art. So something like, say we wanted a piece of vanity art of Loxley from the main game. We know what Loxley looks like. We have a lot of resources that show what Loxley looks like. This actually came up because we did a cover for Official PlayStation Magazine in the UK. And that one didn't take a massive amount of time because it was 2 characters we had in the game. So we went into the game, much as I've described here, we went into the game, posed up those characters, rendered that image, and then that was a brilliant piece of reference material that then the artist could look at, and they knew, how these characters looked in game, and could then obviously kind of expand on that and do their own thing with it and add texture and detail. So yeah, it's been a really interesting process. We've kind of missed a few steps, which I think has made it a little bit more challenging, but I'm very happy with where it's going.
Anything you'd like to add that we wouldn't normally discuss in this?
I just think it's really interesting when I have this a lot when I talk to kind of fans and players of games, is I think the perception of what concept art is incredibly skewed, because concept art is now a marketable resource. I have a lot of art books. The art books. The article on Kotaku where they have like 20 pieces of concept art. And I think there's a perception that that's what concept art is, and that's part of the process. But often the images that are being presented to you are kind of the final steps, the very kind of highly polished, final specific kind of work. It's always fun for me when I open an art book and you see the early sketches. I remember the Mass Effect art book is brilliant for this. They actually has these really early sketches for each of the aliens, which genuinely look like, the kind of work that I see when I'm, working with concept artists, where it's very rough and very quick and just kind of trying to find a direction. So I think that's the key thing, is concept art is a much bigger process than I think showing, players only the very cool, polished stuff at the end, which we all have to do. Because if we show the earlier stuff, then people will be like, well, this isn't as good as the concept art I've seen before. I think that gives a kind of slightly skewed kind of image of what is a really interesting and creative process that I absolutely love doing it with all the people we've worked with up to this point.
If you have a burning question about games, game development, or just about the complexities of the universe, you can send those questions to us via contact@BithelGames.com. That's contact, CONTACT, at BithelGames.com. You can also do it through the YouTube comments of the show, or on Twitter by pinging at Mike Bithell, Mike, M-I-K-E, Bithell, B-I-T-H-E-L-L, or me at Slawinski. That's just, I'm sorry for this one, S-L-I-W-I-N-S-K-I. Just gonna... S-L-I-W-I-N.
I like that people have to put the effort in with our names. I think that's good. I think that's a nice little test of their mettle.
You can also send it to @VolumeGame. So volume, word game. Thanks for listening to this episode of the Bithell Games Podcast. You can always use your support. You can pick yourself up. Gotta rise up. We can always use your support, so please provide reviews and 5 stars on iTunes, likes and subscribes on YouTube, and positive reinforcement on whatever platform you're hearing this show on whenever possible. This podcast was produced by Jonathan Downen. We'll be back next week. I'm Alexander Slawinski. Thanks again, and get in the last word, Mike.
Wa, which is a Japanese word for harmony and balance in design.